Of all the official spells released for 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons, I don't think any have caused more controversy and consternation than Silvery Barbs. And I know based on the title of this video, a percentage of DMs are going to see it and say, oh, that's easy, you fix Silvery Barbs by banning it, problem solved. And yeah, that's certainly one way to handle it. I don't personally ban Silvery Barbs at my table, but I've played with a couple DMs who do. And if you're a DM who hates it, this video might give you an alternative. If you're a player who's had it banned at your table, send this video to your DM, maybe they'll change their mind. I'm going to dig a little into the history of this spell, its controversy, and I'm going to talk about a homebrew method I think fixes the most egregious parts. Not only that, I think my way makes the spell more fun. So come on and take a ride with me, and let's get into it. The spell debuted in late 2021 in the official 5e Strixhaven adventure. Well, it was kind of an adventure, kind of a campaign sourcebook, but it didn't do either one really well. I liked a couple things in Strixhaven, but overall, meh. Anyway, this is not a review of Strixhaven though. This video is a review and a homebrew fix for a particular spell that came out of that book. Silvery Barbs is a level 1 enchantment spell with verbal components, a range of 60 feet, and a casting time of 1 reaction, quote, which you take when a creature you can see within 60 feet of yourself succeeds on an attack roll, an ability check, or a saving throw. In 2024 language, that last part would just say D20 test instead of spelling out the 3 kinds. But speaking of 2024 D&D, this spell was not reprinted in the New Player's Handbook, which I find curious. Some spells from other source books got the update treatment of inclusion in the PHB, but not this one. Interesting. When this spell came out, all the talking D&D heads at the time prophesied that it was going to ruin the game. I don't think that has actually come to pass in the last few years, but it has certainly slowed down an already clunky 5e combat system. I've seen that experience firsthand. I put up a couple polls on social media to check the community's current feelings on the spell, and I gotta say the results really surprised me. Obviously, polls are not scientific data, but compared to similar polls I ran a few years ago, public opinion on the spell has definitely shifted toward the positive. In the comments, a lot of people noted they balanced the spell by giving it to enemy spellcasters, and we're going to talk about that as a possible solution in just a minute. But real quick, could you hit the like and subscribe button below? It only takes a second. Make sure to click all next to notifications, and go ahead and click that join button to get exclusive perks when you become a member. Anyway, let's dig into what the spell does. The full description says you magically distract the triggering creature and turn its momentary uncertainty into encouragement for another creature. The triggering creature must re-roll the d20 and use the lower roll. You can then choose a different creature you can see within range, and you can choose yourself. The chosen creature has advantage on the next attack roll, ability check, or saving throw it makes within 1 minute. A creature can be empowered by only one use of this spell at a time. In some ways I can understand their reasoning for why they created the spell. I imagine they were probably thinking of Strixhaven in a silo, not really considering how this spell would interact with the game as a whole. It almost makes sense if you think of a magic school. Especially when considering low-level magic users, that it gives PCs a way to be relevant in combat using low-level spell slots for things other than damage. But Wizards of the Coast weren't prepared for how popular the spell would become. I mean, it's obviously overpowered, and so every min-maxing spellcaster is gonna want it. They should have seen that coming, but they didn't. One way you could balance this spell a little better is just to take away the advantage half of it, but I don't think that's enough. Now, this isn't the main fix I'm going to present later in this video, but here is an option. Give the advantage to the triggering creature. So you roll to hit and hit me, then I cast Silvery Barbs on you. You have to roll again to hit, but can do it with advantage this time. The attacker has to take the lower roll, so the re-rolled attack might miss, but it probably will not since they're still rolling with advantage. Or I guess technically disadvantage. But in a situation like that, you're only going to cast Silvery Barbs when they're incredibly desperate. And I would expect most players wouldn't want to take Silvery Barbs as a spell if you nerf it like this. If that's your aim, then this should work, but I don't think it's a great fix. Anyway, moving on. A few years ago, Dimension 20 put out a mini-series actual play with Matt Mercer as the GM called The Ravening War. This was a prequel to A Crown of Candy. Honestly, I didn't get into Crown of Candy. There were too many NPCs and I couldn't keep everyone straight, so I stopped watching. But The Ravening War is amazing. It's some of the best actual play I've ever seen, and the final episode is mind-blowing. If you haven't seen it, take a chance. It's hilarious and intense and full of surprises. Anyway, I mention this because there's a scene in Ravening War I think about sometimes. The PCs are mostly spellcasters, and several of them took Silvery Barbs. So in a combat, the players repeatedly forced Matt to reroll hits, and at one point the players were all giggling like, "Sorry we ruined your combat with all these Silvery Barbs, Matt." And he said, "It's no problem, keep on burning up those spell slots." Also, it uses up the PC's reaction, so no counterspell or shield that round. And I think Matt's attitude about it was perfect. As a DM, you want your monsters to hit, and to hit hard, so the combat feels challenging and dangerous to the players. Of course, you usually want the players' PCs to win at the end, but you want them to have to work for it, so the victory feels earned. It's much more fun that way, so let them spend up all their spell slots, drain their resources, and that's when you introduce the second wave of monsters in the combat. As the DM, you set the tone. The players will figure out pretty soon how frequently they can rest after combat. I've played at tables where we pretty much had one big fight every game day, so we learned to not hold back, to use our best abilities and spells in every round of the fight. And I've played at tables where the next long rest was sometimes very hard to come by, and spending limited resources became an incredibly tough choice. And I've seen dungeon masters balance this spell by giving it to enemies. That was a very common comment on my social media posts. 100% of the time the players will hate this, but turnabout is fair play, so this is an option. However, I don't think it's a good option. Especially if part of your issue with Silvery Barbs is the slowdown at the table. Imagine how much slower it is if both sides of a conflict have this time-wasting spell. Another way you could alter this spell is simply by making it a higher level cost. If it uses a second or third level spell slot, players will think a lot harder about casting it. And while this is an option, this still isn't the option I think best handles this tricksy spell at the table. Okay, that's enough foreplay. Let's dig into my homebrew solution for this spell. Are we ready? Could I get a drum roll, please? My fix for Silvery Barbs is simply to change one number in the spell stat block, and that is the 60-foot range. The ultimate indignity of the spell for Dungeon Masters is when a smart player hides their PC behind a stalagmite or marble column or something, so they can just lean out in Silvery Barbs from 50 or 59 feet away, while keeping themselves out of the majority of harm's way. Well, no longer. I advise changing the range of the spell to 15 feet, maybe 10, maybe 20, whatever works for you, but certainly much smaller than the 60 feet the stat block allows. My thinking is thus: if you want to alter the way time works in a battle, to alter the very fabric of reality itself, to turn hits into misses, you can do that, but you don't get to do it from a safe distance. You're going to have to be right there up in the melee mix. You're going to have to put your PC directly in danger for the good of the group. I don't know about you, but I love juicy tactical choices like that in games. I love to risk it for the biscuit. As a DM, this feels like a perfect solution to me, but as a player, I can see people not liking it. If you're a player and you have the kind of DM who skews toward banning a spell like Silvery Barbs, you could present this as an alternative. They should at least hear you out. But what you do is up to you, I'm not like your dad, so take me with a grain of salt, and I will use that salt to flavor the popcorn I eat while I read all your comments below. I think that metaphor kind of fell apart halfway through, but that's fine. I'm GM Jim, now tell me your thoughts on Silvery Barbs in the comments. I want to hear them. Until next time, take it easy, have some fun.